A millionaire on the brink of death refuses help from a black doctor. But what happens next changes his life forever. It was a warm summer evening in Dallas, Texas, and the private wing of St. Mark's Medical Center was unusually busy. The air was thick with the low hum of medical devices and the muted conversations of staff moving quickly from room to room. Amid the controlled chaos, a man in his late 50s was wheeled into one of the private suites, his face pale and drenched in sweat. This was Ethan Caldwell, a self-made millionaire known for his unapologetically brash demeanor and old-school views. His heart was racing, and the pain in his chest was relentless, a cruel reminder that even wealth couldn't shield him from his own body's fragility. As nurses stabilized him, the attending physician walked into the room. Dr. Marcus Reynolds, a man in his mid-40s with an air of calm authority, glanced over the chart before approaching Ethan's bedside. He greeted the nurses with a polite nod, then looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm Dr. Reynolds. You're experiencing what seems to be a cardiac event. We'll need to run a few more tests and start treatment immediately." Ethan's eyes widened, his gaze darting between Dr. Reynolds and the staff. The shock on his face wasn't just from the pain in his chest. It was the realization that the doctor standing before him was black. A tense silence followed, broken only by the beeping of the heart monitor. I'm not comfortable with this," Ethan muttered, his voice strained but resolute. He motioned weakly toward one of the nurses. "Get me someone else. I want another doctor." The room went still. The nurse hesitated, glancing nervously at Dr. Reynolds, who remained composed. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered such prejudice, but the sting of it never fully faded. He cleared his throat, stepping back slightly. "Mr. Caldwell," he began, his tone professional but firm, "I am the attending physician tonight, and I'm fully qualified to handle your case. I assure you, my team and I are here to give you the best possible care." Ethan shook his head, grimacing as another wave of pain shot through his chest. "I don't care about your qualifications. I said I want someone else." The nurse opened her mouth to interject, but Dr. Reynolds raised a hand, signaling her to stay silent. He glanced at Ethan one more time before turning toward the door. "I'll step outside for now," he said evenly, his voice betraying none of the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "But I strongly advise you to reconsider." As Dr. Reynolds exited, the tension in the room was palpable. The nurses whispered among themselves, clearly uneasy about the situation. Ethan, meanwhile, leaned back against the pillows, breathing heavily, his expression a mix of pain and defiance. But as the minutes ticked by, his condition began to deteriorate. The chest pain intensified, and beads of sweat gathered on his forehead. Despite his outward bravado, fear flickered in his eyes. He was running out of time, and deep down he knew it. But the fear wasn't enough to make him confront the walls he'd built around himself, not yet. Time felt like it was slipping through Ethan Caldwell's fingers, each second more unbearable than the last. The once dismissive millionaire was now clutching his chest, his breath shallow and erratic. The nurses hovered anxiously, exchanging concerned glances as Ethan's vitals steadily declined. The monitors beeped in a chaotic rhythm, underscoring the urgency of the situation. Ethan's mind swirled with fragmented thoughts. He had built his empire by maintaining control of his business, his image, his life. Yet here he was, vulnerable and helpless, his fate dangling precariously in the hands of others. The irony wasn't lost on him, but pride and prejudice still held him captive. A younger nurse, her voice trembling slightly, leaned in close. "Mr. Caldwell, your condition is worsening. We need to act quickly. Dr. Reynolds is the best option you have right now." Ethan's eyes, clouded with a mix of pain and stubbornness, flicked toward her. "I told you, find someone else," he rasped, his words carrying less force than before. "Anyone else." The nurse hesitated but didn't move. She could see the fear behind his bravado, the cracks forming in his resolve. Outside the room, Dr. Reynolds stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold through the glass. He'd seen this before. patients letting prejudice outweigh reason, sometimes to devastating ends. But he also knew when to step in. A senior nurse walked up to Dr. Reynolds, her expression grave. "We're losing precious time. If we don't intervene now, he might not make it." Dr. Reynolds exhaled deeply, his jaw tightening briefly. He didn't need to think twice. Personal feelings aside, he had taken an oath to save lives, even when those lives were wrapped in layers of ignorance. As he re-entered the room, Ethan's head snapped toward him, his defiance flickering for a moment before the pain consumed him again. Dr. Reynolds ignored the glare, moving swiftly to the bedside and scanning the monitors. "Mr. Caldwell," he said calmly but with urgency, "your heart is under severe strain. You're experiencing an acute myocardial infarction, a heart attack. If we don't administer treatment now, the damage could be irreversible." Ethan groaned, his hand gripping the railing of the bed so tightly his knuckles turned white. The room seemed to close in on him. Every breath was a struggle, every word a battle. But even now, he hesitated, his prejudices clinging to him like a second skin. "Why? Why can't you just call someone else?" he croaked, his voice barely audible. Dr. Reynolds met his gaze, his expression unflinching. "Because there isn't time," he replied bluntly. "And because I'm the best person to help you right now." For a moment, their eyes locked. Ethan's filled with a mix of desperation and resistance, Dr. Reynolds steady and unwavering. The tension in the room was thick, but the reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. Ethan's body was betraying him, and he could feel it. Suddenly, a sharp, stabbing pain tore through his chest, causing him to cry out. The heart monitor screamed in alarm, and the nurses sprang into action. Panic gripped Ethan like a vice. This was it, he thought. This was how it ended. Not in his sprawling mansion, not surrounded by the luxuries he had spent decades amassing, but here, in a sterile hospital room, with a doctor he had refused to trust. But just as the darkness threatened to close in, Ethan felt the weight of his choices pressing harder than the pain in his chest. He wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Ethan's chest heaved as he gasped for air, the sharp pain radiating down his left arm now impossible to ignore. The room seemed to blur, the faces of the nurses fading into the background as his vision tunneled. He clenched his teeth, his mind racing through the haze of agony and fear. This was no longer about control or principles. It was survival. I can't," Ethan stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He swallowed hard, his throat dry and raw. "Fine. Do it." Dr. Reynolds, already prepared, didn't waste a second. He nodded briskly to the nurses, issuing precise instructions as they moved swiftly around the room. "Prep the cath lab," he ordered. "We're going in for an emergency angioplasty." Ethan's eyes fluttered shut as the medical team sprang into action, wheeling him down the brightly lit corridor. The sound of rushing footsteps and muffled voices filled his ears, but he could barely focus. His pride, once an unyielding fortress, now crumbled under the weight of his fragility. For the first time in his life, he was utterly dependent on someone he had dismissed. The procedure was a race against time. Dr. Reynolds worked with practiced precision, guiding a thin catheter through Ethan's blood vessels to clear the blockage in his coronary artery. The tension in the operating room was palpable, but Dr. Reynolds remained calm, his hands steady as he navigated the intricate process. Hours later, Ethan opened his eyes to the soft glow of fluorescent lights. He was back in his room, the faint beep of the heart monitor punctuating the silence. His body felt heavy, his chest sore, but the crushing pain was gone. Slowly, his gaze shifted to the figure seated near the window. Dr. Reynolds sat with a tablet in his hands, his expression neutral as he reviewed Ethan's charts. Noticing the movement, he looked up and approached the bed. "You're stable now," he said, his voice even but not devoid of warmth. "We were able to clear the blockage and insert a stent. You're lucky. You'll make a full recovery if you follow the aftercare plan." Ethan blinked, his mind still sluggish, The words sank in slowly, carrying with them a wave of relief and something else he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, shame, both perhaps. For a moment neither man spoke. Ethan's pride warred with his conscience, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire. Finally, he cleared his throat. I suppose I should thank you." Dr. Reynolds tilted his head slightly, a flicker of a smile ghosting across his lips. "You don't have to," he replied, his tone devoid of resentment. "It's my job." Ethan nodded faintly, the gesture heavy with unspoken words. But Dr. Reynolds wasn't finished. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, meeting Ethan's gaze directly. "Mr. Caldwell," he began, his voice steady, "you came very close to losing your life today. I need you to understand that this isn't just about your heart. It's about your mindset. Prejudice could have cost you your life tonight." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. The weight of the truth pressed down on him, forcing him to confront the ugly reality he had long ignored. Dr. Reynolds continued, his tone softer now. "I've been in this field for nearly 20 years. I've worked with people from every background imaginable, rich, poor, black, white. And you know what I've learned? In moments like these, none of that matters. All that matters is trust." Ethan's throat tightened as the words sank in. Trust. It was such a simple concept, yet it had eluded him for so long. He had spent his life building walls, fortifying his own world against anything, or anyone, that didn't fit his narrow view. And now, those walls had nearly cost him everything. "Why do you do it?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice hoarse. "Why put up with people like me?" Dr. Reynolds leaned back slightly, his gaze thoughtful. "Because it's not about you, Mr. Caldwell. It's about the people who come after you. If I can change even one person's perspective, then it's worth it." The words struck a chord Ethan hadn't realized existed. He looked away, staring at the sterile ceiling as a strange mix of emotions churned within him. Humility, regret, and an inkling of something new. Understanding. But understanding wasn't enough. Not yet. Ethan knew the real change had to come from within. The hours dragged on in the quiet of Ethan's hospital room, the hum of the machines a constant reminder of his near brush with death. Sleep eluded him, and with every passing moment, the events of the past day replayed in his mind like a looping film. For the first time in decades, Ethan Caldwell felt small, not insignificant, but vulnerable in a way that stripped away his carefully crafted armor. The door creaked open, and Ethan's eyes darted toward the sound. Dr. Reynolds stepped in, a clipboard in hand, and an air of quiet determination about him. Ethan tensed reflexively, unsure of what to expect. Was this going to be another lesson? Another subtle admonishment? But Dr. Reynolds surprised him. "I wanted to check on you before my shift ends," the doctor said, pulling up the chair beside Ethan's bed. "How are you feeling?" Ethan hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. "Better, I guess. Sore, but alive." Dr. Reynolds nodded, setting the clipboard on the small table beside him. "Alive is good. Sore means your body's healing." Silence settled between them for a moment before Ethan spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I've been thinking about what you said. About trust." Dr. Reynolds tilted his head, encouraging him to continue. Ethan sighed heavily, the weight of his thoughts evident in his expression. "I guess I've always seen the world a certain way, built my life around those views, and maybe, just maybe, I've been wrong." The admission hung in the air, raw and unpolished. For Ethan, it was the first crack in the walls he had spent decades building. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Change isn't easy," he said. "It takes time, and sometimes it takes something as drastic as a heart attack to start that process. But what matters is what you do with that realization. Ethan glanced at the doctor, studying him for a moment. "You've probably seen the worst of people, haven't you?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Dr. Reynolds smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed a hint of weariness. "I've seen a lot," he admitted, "but I've also seen the best of people. That's what keeps me going." The conversation shifted as Dr. Reynolds began sharing fragments of his life, stories of growing up in a small Louisiana town where opportunities were scarce and expectations low. He spoke of his mother, a school teacher who worked tirelessly to instill in him the value of education, and his father, a mechanic who taught him the importance of perseverance. "When I decided to go to medical school," Dr. Reynolds said, his voice steady, "there were people who doubted me, teachers, peers, even some family members. But my parents, they believed in me when no one else did." Ethan listened, his usual skepticism replaced by genuine interest. For the first time he saw the man behind the title, the sacrifices, the hurdles, and the quiet triumphs that had shaped Dr. Reynolds into the person he was. "But it wasn't just about proving them wrong," the doctor continued. "It was about proving to myself that I could make a difference, that I could be the person who helps others, no matter what they think of me." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of those words settling in his chest. He thought of his own life, of the privilege he had taken for granted, the doors that had opened for him simply because of who he was. For all his success, had he ever really made a difference? Dr. Reynolds rose from the chair, picking up the clipboard as he prepared to leave. "You'll be discharged in a couple of days," he said. "Take this as an opportunity, Mr. Caldwell. A second chance doesn't come often." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the doctor as he exited the room. He wanted to say something, to apologize, to express his gratitude, but the words stuck in his throat. It wasn't just embarrassment holding him back. It was the realization that action spoke louder than words. But words would come later, when the weight of his choices finally matched the courage to confront them. Ethan sat alone in the hospital room, the dim light casting soft shadows on the sterile walls. The weight of the past few days pressed heavily on him, but for the first time in years, it wasn't the kind of burden that fueled his ego or drove him to dominate. It was different, something closer to humility. As he prepared to be discharged, Ethan reflected on the man who had saved his life. Dr. Reynolds was more than just a physician. He was a living testament to perseverance, humanity, and the kind of integrity Ethan had rarely seen in his world of power and privilege. The thought stirred something deep within him, a strange mix of gratitude and regret. The nurse arrived with his discharge papers, and Ethan hesitated before signing them. "Before I go," he said, his voice steady but softer than usual, "can you send Dr. Reynolds here? I need to speak with him." Minutes later, the doctor entered the room, his expression curious but composed. "Mr. Caldwell," he greeted, "what can I do for you?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unused to moments like this. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice rough, "for how I acted, for what I said, or didn't say. I was wrong." Dr. Reynolds regarded him for a moment, his face unreadable. Then, with a small nod, he replied, "Acknowledging that takes courage, Mr. Caldwell. I appreciate it." But Ethan wasn't done. "You didn't just save my life. You showed me something I've been too blind to see. I've spent years building walls thinking they protected me, but they've only shut me off from the things that really matter." Dr. Reynolds listened, his silence encouraging Ethan to continue. "I've wasted so much time," Ethan admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want to change, and not just for myself. I need to do better, for others." Dr. Reynolds smiled faintly, a look of genuine warmth crossing his face. "Change is a process," he said, "but the fact that you're willing to start is a big step." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. As Dr. Reynolds left, Ethan resolved to use his second chance wisely. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't go back to the man he was before. Months later, Ethan Caldwell became a vocal advocate for diversity in the healthcare system, funding scholarships for underprivileged students aspiring to become doctors. It wasn't about penance or redemption, it was about finally doing something that mattered. As he stood at a podium during a scholarship gala, his voice steady and confident, Ethan finished his speech with a sentiment that summed up his journey. It's never too late to change, and sometimes the person you least expect to teach you that lesson is the one who saves your life. Life doesn't give many second chances, but when it does, it's up to us to make them count. If Ethan's story moved you, take a moment to reflect on your own walls and biases. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire change and self-reflection.